yeah, Laureta, we are good to go.
Okay, thanks, Hayley. Well, welcome everybody to this, what I think is going to be a fantastic Future Drought Fund webinar focused on diversity and inclusion. And we're really lucky to have a fantastic panel of speakers with us today. I'm Laureta, Wallace, the General Manager of Media and Communications at the National Farmers Federation, and the NFF is really pleased to be able to host today's webinar. And before we get started, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We meet today on different lands across Australia. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet, work and live, and recognise that this land has always been and always will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' connection to land, water and culture, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. So today we have, I'm delighted to say, almost 200 people online. So I'm just, as has come custom for these things, we're going to run through a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. For your best viewing experience, please select the speaker view. And if you can, as we're going along, really utilise the chat function. So please, great Catherine McGuffey, use the chat function to let us know where you're coming from today, what you do, and also just to engage. So to put some questions in there, share your experiences and comments, that'd be really fantastic. We are recording this conversation, so I hope everybody's comfortable with that. Hopefully nobody minds. And just we're talking about diversity and inclusion today, so we're going to be getting down into some pretty personal stuff. So I'm sure I don't need to tell everybody or anybody online, but please let's just be really respectful in our comments and our questions. We've got 4 fantastic panelists who have come on to share their personal experiences, so let's be respectful. And I don't know about you, but I like to know a bit of the format of how these things will run. It has probably gone a bit askew now because we're 10 minutes late, but what we're focused on is I'm going to post some questions to our panelists, and then we're going to go about 12:40, we're going to dive into questions. So I'd like to think with almost 200 people online, we are going to have some pretty good questions. So I want to make sure that we've got enough time to explore those questions. Now, like I said, the NFF is really absolutely delighted to be able to be part of this webinar, and hopefully most of you online will be familiar with the NFF's goal for agriculture to be a $100 billion industry by 2030. And we have a plan that will hopefully get us there, the 2030 roadmap. And in that plan, we've recognised that without diversity of thought, without diversity of experience, skill and vision, it's going to make it very difficult to be able to achieve that $100 billion by 2030 and indeed growth thereafter. And we've also recognised that we won't get diversity within our industry, which has been a challenge for our industry, without proactive change. Look, and I think as a farm representative body who can speak for NFF and all of our members when we say, we need to do better at getting diversity within our ranks. I'm not sure how many of you have been to the NFF boardroom, but there you'll see, a tribute to our history, and on the board is our past presidents, and they are all white males. And those gentlemen have made fantastic contribution to bringing the NFF to being what it is today. But we recognise that that is no longer representative of agriculture in 2021. So thank God, well, not thank God, thankfully, sorry, we have a circuit breaker with our current president, Fiona Simpson. And Fiona is really at the heart of what we're doing in terms of our diversity and inclusion here at the NFF and across the NFF membership. In particular, Fiona and I we work on the Diversity in Agriculture Leadership Program, which next year enters its 5th year. And that's tackling just one part of diversity, but it's about seeing more females into the leadership ranks of the NFF. So it's a mentoring program, and it's supported fantastically by almost 30 partners, and who themselves commit to making meaningful change within their organisation towards gender diversity. So maybe Hayley, if you could put the link to our diversity and ag leadership program in the chat if you can at some point. And also our 2030 roadmap link would be great too, because in that we have some fantastic, I think, fantastic aspirations and goals. Probably, arguably one of the most important is to make agriculture an accessible career opportunity for all Australians. We also have a goal in there to work with Indigenous leaders to increase engagement and opportunities for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people within our industry, but really importantly within the leadership of our industry. And we have a goal to double the number of women in our leadership ranks by 2030. So the NFF really is living and breathing diversity and inclusion, and I'm looking forward today to having a discussion about how we can make D&I more than a buzzword and how we can actually close in on that goal to make agriculture accessible, genuinely accessible for all Australians. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our fantastic panelists today. Danielle Conchinata, sorry, Danielle, we just had a quick conversation about how to pronounce your last name, and I think I've stuffed it up there. But Danielle, you're the Vice President of the Victorian Farmers Federation and an egg farmer from South Werribee in Victoria. Thank you, Danielle. Troy Setter, CEO of the Consolidated Pastoral Company. Hello, Troy. Jason Smith, 2017 Continent Group and ABC Rural Young Farmer of the Year and Dairy Farmer, Victorian Dairy Farmer. Hello, Jason. And then we've got Melissa Fletcher, based in Dubbo, CEO of Fletcher International Exports. Hello, Melissa. I'm very wet Dubbo, I'm sure, at the moment. All right, well, we're going to kick off with you, Danielle. I'm going to admit that I let out a little bit of a squeal when the news came through, I think probably about a year ago now, maybe, when yourself and Emma Germano as president were elected as the new VFF leadership, a really landmark development in farm representative world for sure. So I want to just talk to you, Danielle. Wow, what led you to think that the vice president of the VFF or a member of the VFF leadership might be something you want to do? How long ago did that seed of thought plant in your head, and how did you go about making it a reality? And who supported you? Talk to us about that process.
Yeah, so 2019, I had my daughter, went on maternity leave, and then COVID happened, 2020, as we're all aware. And I didn't really have, so maternity leave finished, and I didn't really have anything to go back to. So we didn't really want to be standing down any more staff on our farm. Times were tough as it was, and my husband and I were already living on one wage, so we were okay in that aspect. So I chose to stay home with my daughter. And if you've got a small toddler at home, that's somewhat mind-numbing, and there's not a lot of thought process in that. So I was actually very fortunate. It was a male, older male from the VFF, who actually gave me a phone call and said, would you be interested in running for the vice presidency of the Victorian Farmers Federation? And it's actually not really something that's ever crossed my mind, but it's, I saw Emma. So I thought, well, I saw myself in someone else who was holding a position like this. So I thought, well, why not? I mean, what do I have to lose? And not much, turns out I won. So I was very fortunate, but I've been extremely fortunate in the kinds of people that have lent out a hand. And once I got the position with Emma, I mean, the support is overwhelming. Like, even from our members, I think the first particular branch meeting I went to with our CEO at the time, Jane, we had our 2 male leadership members of that particular branch who stood up and actually gave us a bit of a standing ovation. And we're really proud that the VFF have come so far in regarding modernisation, the fact that it felt progressive, as he stated. But in saying that, we are all very hardworking. We're not here as token positions. I mean, we've been spending years upon years to get to this kind of place. And honestly have an overwhelming amount of support, everything from leadership right down to membership with the VFF. So I'm very lucky.
Thanks, Danielle. That's that's actually beautiful to hear that there was a standing ovation for you and Emma. And sorry, it was remiss of me not to mention that your CEO is also a fantastic woman, Jane Lovell, there at the VFF. And that's something that through our diversity and ag leadership program, we talk about, that it's fantastic and vital to have a network of supportive women around you, but men are really important in terms of supporting people, and women shouldn't be backward and going forward in asking for that support from men. And by and large, we see it in the NFF family, like you've given an example there, that men are really pleased, maybe relieved to hand the baton over to the women. Personally, I think getting young people of both genders into the around our committee tables and board tables in farm representative bodies is the most pressing issue. How do we reach out to more young people, and what might be some of the barriers at why they might be reluctant to engage, in your opinion?
You need to see yourself represented somewhere, and that is how you get that empowerment. So as my example was, I saw Emma in a leadership position in a male-dominated industry, and I thought, well, if she could, I can. And I think the more diversity and the more inclusion allows for the more empowerment, and then the more empowerment we have, the more consultation, and essentially we end up with better policy, we end up with better discussions, we have a robust discussion, and broad perspective of ideas. So yeah, does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think it's there's probably no one answer to it, and it's actually a responsibility that's shared across all of us. So thanks, Danielle. Well, I'm going to go over to you, Troy. Hello, how are you? I want to start by saying that Troy and CPC is a founding member of NFF's Diversity and Ag Leadership Program. From the story I recall is that Fiona tapped Troy on the shoulder and said, "Troy, I want you to help us get this program going." And she didn't have to ask twice. So we're very, very grateful for CPC for doing that. Troy, can you share with us just a little bit about what the CPC workforce looks like? I know it is quite diverse in all respects.
Yeah, thanks, Laureta. Great to be here. So the CPC team is spread between Australia and Indonesia. Our team in Australia is, most of them work on stations in Northern Australia. So we're about 45 to 47% female in our team in Australia, and the rest are male. It's pretty easy maths. But we have a few Indigenous background people. Some are local, some aren't local, working for us, and we also have a fairly diverse background in terms of where people come from. It's not all of the people on our stations are farmers' sons or daughters. There's a lot of people from Sydney, a lot of people from diverse backgrounds outside of agriculture, and some in agriculture. Our team in Indonesia, we've got about 600 people, majority Muslim, but Hindu, Christian, a real ethnic blend and diversity there. Not as many female participants there, and that's partly cultural, but also the nature of the work. It's very hands-on in some parts of the business, and also the hours and times that it works. But we have a pretty diverse group of people at CPC. The diversity for us is a lot broader than male, female. It's beliefs, it's energy, it's religion, it's ethnic background, it's where your country sort of is from, and that creates a really good diverse team for us at CPC.
So through the Diversity and Ag Leadership Program, Troy, we've been at NFF. Had the pleasure of getting to know more about your organisation, and as you've described there, it really is a melting pot of diversity, which is, I'm sure, by and large great, but it must come with its challenges. How do you manage the different needs of all those of all the different backgrounds and experiences of the people that are in your team?
Look, I think broadly we try and have no barriers. We try and be fair and honest and transparent with people, and have a really good culture of leadership and trust, value creation, safety, and community and welfare. I mean, they're our values, so we try and live those. We're not perfect by any means, but that's what we try and live. I think also, in that process of what our business is like. We're pretty open and honest with people what our business is like. It is hard work. It is hot. It's outdoors. If it's raining, you're working. If it's cold, you're working. You know, we do long hours. We work with livestock. We do cropping and farming on a smaller scale. If stuff needs doing at night, you know, trucks need loading at night. So we're very open and transparent with our people about what our business is like. That actually means that some people say this job or this business is not for me, or they may say, you know, this part of the business is not for me. And I think for us, it's not about sugarcoating what the business is. There is some roles in our business that are best suited to males. Those physical, hard lifting jobs, you know, physical jobs in the feedlots are absolutely, you know, better suited to males. There's some administrative jobs. There's some data recording jobs. There's, you know, where you really need accuracy. I'll be totally honest. Women suit those jobs so much better. And I know that annoys people when I say that, but broadly, it's not just about male, female. It's best person gets the job at CPC, and some people are better suited than others. But we're really open and transparent about what the work is and who's better suited or who wouldn't be suited to those roles. And that means that we have a great, diverse workforce.
Mm. And you actually, it hasn't happened by chance, though, has it? So I'm sure there is just some chance that it has happened, but you do certainly set targets, be strategic about how getting diversity across your business, and then report on your success against those targets.
Yeah, so we absolutely set some targets a few years ago to ensure we had no barriers and ensure that the best person got the job, and to ensure that we weren't holding people back. And that meant that we needed to be better around how we treated women in the organisation. We needed to be better about what were the accommodation options for females in the organisation, what were the accommodation options like for couples. That then flowed through to us getting close to 50% female participation in Australia. We report that every year.
Yep.
We report that through the federal government diversity reporting, and we report it through yourselves. And we're open and transparent to our team about it. I would like to have more women in supervisory positions, management positions. There's some challenges with that. There's some challenges with where people hit their sort of, you know, time when they're ready for take on a particular role, and when they want to have children, if we're really honest about that. But we have some governesses on stations for some of our young mothers. We have, you know, childcare support. We have, you know, support to try and get to and from school, and school buses and those sorts of things. We help with boarding schools. So we're not perfect with it. We could do better at getting more women into leadership roles. But if you step back 5 years ago, we didn't have as many, and we're continuing to grow that. And we've got to work out how we get more of the right people in the right position.
Thanks, Troy. And gosh, if we had more time, we could really delve into that childcare and the fact that women can't escape being the bearers of children, and the impact that has on them getting into leadership roles and just indeed progressing their career. Which I go over to Melissa. Melissa, you might have some insights into that very topic. Melissa, from what I've read about you, you're somebody who probably doesn't do a great deal of talking about D&I. You're just living it and getting things done, and really, I think embodying what Danielle said. It was talking about, you know, you can't be what you can't see, and yours definitely being something that people can see in your industry. So CEO of Fletcher's International, a mother of 3, an Indigenous woman. Talk to us about how important it is to you to be a role model for women, and for Indigenous women in particular, and working in I'd imagine it's a pretty blokey industry, meat processing.
Thank you. It's a big business. We have a big variety with our vertical integration. So we go right from farms, feedlots, grain. We have large production processing plants, exporting to 90 countries. We have freight and logistics, and we have our own 3 trains that we run down to the port. And we have hundreds of thousands of containers of commodities and meat and wool out there in the world. I think the greatest opportunity I got as a young person coming through, probably got lucky, was Kerry Packer seen my potential at 19 and wanted to nick me for his plant manager in Rockhampton. And Dad said, no, she's going to the Western Australian plant. She's going to run that, which it wasn't, but he said it. And so I made that happen. So I'm very lucky that I got to go through those experiences, being a 22-year-old greenfield site. I was very much an optimistic. I hadn't been tarred by anything. I had a can-do attitude and just lucky. I think a lot of it was timing and support, that you had people that would believe in you. So going back to that question with how do we allow opportunities, particularly with, with Indigenous in agriculture, it's knowing sometimes that we're not always at the start line is not the same for us all. So in this country, and on this side, over in New South Wales, for example, I have 700 employees. I have 165 Indigenous throughout our organisation, many in management roles, supervisory roles. And I think at the end of the day, really, if Australia could understand sometimes with the systematic things that have happened in the past, maybe we'd understand where we are on the starting line in the beginning. So everyone on this call, I would say, if you haven't seen Incarceration Nation, have a look. Because when we understand sometimes where we come from, we have more compassionate ways about us, more flexibility. And with labour issues across the agriculture industry, I know, being a mother with 3 children under 4, running a business, it's tough. So the rewards are greater by being flexible, being compassionate, being open-minded, and understanding that leadership and role models comes from all different types. In saying that, I think we've got over 24 different nationalities in our business. So we know lots about religion, traditions, but tolerance. We have massive tolerance. So you've gone from a heavily male-dominated industry, particularly with our production plants, to the most brilliant workforce. I mean, I say to people, my worst enemies, I don't wish bad on them. I just ask them to go into business for themselves. It's tough, but I could not do what I do every day without the team of people I'm with, and I am so grateful. As I said, with the integration of the businesses we have, I understand farming, I understand out there in the land, but I tell you what happens within processing plants, you need brave-hearted people of all different types to make the whole supply chain work. So with compassion, I think, is the way forward, and open-mindedness.
Thanks, Melissa. Well, quite a lot to unpack there. And I really do love you pointing out there that we don't all come from the same place in the starting blocks. So, we hear a lot about the best person for the job, and, we're all equal. But absolutely, I think as organisations in agriculture, we need to recognise that we need frameworks that reach out and help people from, whether it's different cultures, women, make sure, be proactive in making sure they're represented in our industry, and they might not, many people haven't had the opportunities that, like that many of us on this call mightn't have, but if we put the structures in place, we can change that. And I did read that story this morning, actually, about Kerry, your offer from Kerry Packer, and I love that you held your dad to account to make it real, his opportunity. And I think all those your fantastic workforce you've just talked about their tolerance, the fantastic culture that you've got. I think I would attribute to your leadership, I'm sure. And I read a quote that says that you work shoulder to shoulder with your workers, and you would never ask them to do anything that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself. So
yeah, I've taken off my high vis shirt just for this call.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, I don't doubt that.
I really have.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. No. Well, I think we could spend another hour just unpacking that, but I'm going to move to you, Jason. And apologies, before we started today, I actually wanted to ask you how to pronounce where your farm is actually located, because I was having a bit of trouble with it when I was reading that. But in Southwest Victoria, but what's the actual locality?
Irrawillipie.
Irrawillipie. Okay. Irrawillipie. Not that hard at all, actually. So, Jason, I was actually at the award ceremony where you were named Young Farmer of the Year, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a voice that we need to have and to foster for our industry. And then a little while later, I saw your participation in the marriage equality plebiscite and all the discussion that happened around that, and I just, was blown away by your contribution. So thank you. I feel like in agriculture, the fact that we're having this webinar today, we're getting really a lot better about talking about diversity and inclusion, but how comfortable are we with talking about LGBTIQ plus and how we can be better at being more welcoming to that community in our industry?
Well, firstly, that award system ceremony was quite awkward because it was right in the middle of the plebiscite, and Warwick Long, who was giving the talk on the day, dropped me right in front of all the nationals and things who had some opinions. So that was a very full-on day. No, look, I think there's a lot of challenges with LGBTIQ people in agriculture. I think a lot of it goes back to the things we've heard already about if you can't see, you can't be. Yeah. And I meet people every day, and I mentor quite a few young people who believe that there just isn't a place for them in agriculture. And I myself went through that when I was at university and studying ag science and realising who I was, and thinking I can't do what I want to do. I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. And I suppose it got to a point where I came out to my family as the hardest thing ever happened, and then this weight just lifted off my shoulder, and you just say that you're just the same as anyone else. You're the same farmer as you were the day before, and so yeah, it's just it's just a matter of being seen, and in that there's no need to make us seen, but just be seen. So for example, when I go to different agricultural events, I make sure my partner comes along, and I introduce him to everyone. And yeah, it's just a matter of our sexuality does not interfere with our ability to do our jobs. And it's been wonderful listening so far, because I just realised that my 2IC on the farm is a Yorta woman, a single mum with 2 kids, and I hadn't even noticed that she was a First Nations person. I just employed her for her thing, so it's really good so far. Anyway, sorry, I just had to put that in.
No, don't be sorry. And Jason, I love that you're mentoring other LGBTIQ people. Tell me how that happens. I would imagine that quite a few people would have reached out to you when Warwick Long dropped you in it then, and I think you probably, I don't know if it was on the spot or a few moments later, a little while later, decide to embrace it and thought, maybe you thought you had a responsibility to have a voice for all your rural peers. Do people approach you, or how does the mentoring happen? Is it talk to me about that?
The first thing was I did a small article in our local Warrnambool paper for marriage equality, and this is when I didn't have enough media training, obviously, and didn't realise that all the papers were syndicated and they went right around the country. And so I was actually at a United Dairy Farmers meeting the following night when it hit the internet, and my phone just blew up. There was it was something called "The Farmer Wants the Right, Not a Wife" or something like that, some stupid title. But it, I had 2,500 friend requests on Facebook that night alone, and so I got contacted by a lot of people. And I suppose that the best example of it is it was a young person who, a young fella who was from a different dairying area to me, who was really struggling, who wanted to stay on the farm, study agriculture and stay on the farm, but he had received a lot of bullying. And I got to meet his parents, just talking over the phone, and was sort of going along okay. And then after a particular bad bullying thing, this young Year 12 guy attempted suicide. And it was the most confronting thing for me to have a phone call from his mum, and the reality of the isolation, especially for LGBTI people in rural areas, and the high rates of suicide. And that's why I sort of did it. And so when thankfully he was not successful, he's gone on and got top grades in the first 2 years of agriculture. He's still studying, and he's planning succession planning on going back onto the farm with his new partner, and it's wonderful. But it got to that sort of lows. There's a lot of bad stories, and I constantly meet people who have thought they've had to leave the farm because of their sexuality and move to the city, and they wish. And you actually find a lot of LGBTI people who have left the land end up having little hobby farms because they have that yearning to go back. And I say there's no need to ever leave. And so we're seeing a lot more women in national leadership roles and people of different nationalities. I can't wait until we have our first VFF president who is a member of the LGBTI community,
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So on that note, what can, farm representative bodies or agribusiness organisations, people who, organisations, what can we do to be more inclusive? What can the NFF, what can VFF do to be more inclusive?
I think just from from businesses is just to publicise that you're an equal opportunity employer and that you're LGBTI friendly, and because if there's a lot of people, and this is the saddest thing about it, is there is a lot of people in agriculture who are LGBTI who can't be themselves, and that's I had a friend who just came out as trans, and he had to transition while trying to run a farm, married with kids, and his marriage fell apart. And so it's if everyone knows there's more organizations involved with agriculture that are friendly, and that you could bring your new partner to a young farmers gathering or whatever, and because if it doesn't have to be big, it just needs to be a little thing off to the side that a little rainbow flag with a tick or something, something like that, as simple as that, just to say that you're accepting and everything's fine, and you'll find that people will just grow in confidence and everything will be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a fantastic recommendation. Something very simple that I think we can all do, and we can actually probably change lives with that.
Definitely, such a small thing.
Yeah. All right, Jason. So we're at 12:40, so we're going to dive into some questions. Now, there was the opportunity for people who registered to send in their questions beforehand. So we've got some through, and I can't see here on the chat who they're from. So apologies about that, but I'm just going to read them out as they come in. But please, everyone on the call, don't be shy. And I think our panelists, I'll speak for our panelists, that they're prepared to take the tough questions here. So don't be shy, put your questions in. Now, I've got one here. How do we create jobs for unskilled labour force in rural communities from the ground without specialised training? Melissa, I think this is one for you, first off.
All right. Well, I think sometimes it can be a step process. So understanding, again, it goes back to understanding what barriers are up before we even start. So if I was running the country, the first thing I'd do is any teenager at school, before they leave school in rural, regional and remote areas, I would offer them to get their their driver's license. I find transport one of the biggest barriers before you even start, particularly in agriculture where your mornings may be very early and very late and very distant. So that is a massive barrier for our young people and unskilled right there. Then you have problems with understanding where people are before they start the work day. Have they got somewhere to live? What's the environment that they're coming from? Are they a single parent? So being compassionate and aware of where the starting block is a really good start with those things. Now, understanding where I come with so many different languages, people say, how you know, of course you have work instructions with interpretations and so forth. But, you know, at the end of the day, I believe body language and kindness and a smile and showing's better than telling goes so far. So all I ask for, anyone can look good on paper, and I'm talking right through all types of jobs, but it's how people come with an open mind and an attitude. If you come with an open mind and an attitude willing to learn, then I think at the end of the day, getting people trained is easier. But I look at it's tough. Showing's better than telling. And having mentors in place, role models to look at, they're all the things that we've talked about. But understanding leaders and role models take all different shapes and forms.
Yeah.
And positivity, you know, kindness, consideration, positivity can just pull a workforce and bring people along for the journey.
Melissa, I love that, because we probably talk often at lofty levels about policies and things like that, but you've just said like a really practical thing, driver's license, and how did the day start for them? Are they hungry? Have they had a good night's sleep?
Correct.
And I love the thing about having a good mindset, but I'd imagine that some people who come to present to you for their first day of work are lacking confidence, probably zero confidence. How do you bring confidence out in people?
So that really comes down to your whole management team, which, you know, we just really try and foster compassionate, caring. Sometimes it's tough love. It depends on the individual, and it's reading the individual and what their needs are, having the conversation, having good communication. And we have a mindset within our team that we might only turn around 1 out of 10, but 1 out of 10 is massive. And I say that because particularly I have a vested interest in my people, in Indigenous Australians. When you look at statistics for juvenile, for a child to be in the juvenile system, it costs $500,000 for one juvenile. So why are we not preventing rather than reacting? If you give $500,000 to a business to put on 5 mentors or help people get driver's license or somewhere to live, it's far better off than the systemic thing that can go wrong. So there's lots of different levels. I think it's all about tolerance. If you don't have tolerance, and I just love the natural progression that has happened. It's got to be real and inherent. And I know we all talk about targets, but if your management team don't feel it and see it, nothing's going to change. So I would say we would have maybe 5, 6 same-sex married couples within our organisation. I would have 10 transgender, and it has just naturally happened over the last couple of years. And I don't want to say this to you, but at the end of the day, it's hard. We do our staff Christmas party. We do these musical skits, and last year one of our musical skits was to the song "Together" with Sia, and we take the song off, but it is all about rainbows. It is all about acceptance, because we would have never got through COVID without keeping our staff that, and a lot were from overseas that were stuck here in Australia, and that inclusion that we all need one another. is just amazing. And being a girl that has been in the meat industry, working school holidays since the age of 12, I've seen this hard macho core that you don't talk about. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about how we're feeling. And I love being a female, that I absolutely can say that to all my employees. They've seen me cry, they've seen me be nervous, they see me hug, and that is the hardest thing through COVID for me, is that touch you're not meant to do. Well,
I think you said in the article, the same article I was reading about it this morning, that having the females part of your workforce during the tough times of the drought, really, you know, the inherent softness of women was a real buffer for what people were going through then. And I just absolutely love the diversity of your workforce. And I'd imagine that in you know, such a significant business like Fletcher's, for Dubbo, for example, that what you're building in the business there then infiltrates out into the community and has a really positive impact. I'm going to go to you, Troy, for some thoughts on that same question. How do we foster unskilled people to come into our industry that, you know, without formalized training?
Look, I think there's a really unique opportunity at the moment, because most businesses that employ people generally in Australia are short of people and talent, and it's really short in agriculture at the moment and food processing, production, fibre. So there is a vacuum there. So that means that people are going to have to just, who didn't really want to do unskilled labour, are getting unskilled labour in anyway. So, but for us, you know, when I say we want the best person, the best person gets the job, that's probably more about promotion within the organisation rather than and breaking down barriers for promotion within the organisation rather than the entry of people into the organisation. You know, the best energy gets the starter job. The best drive gets the starter job. But we also do employ people who've got no background in our industry. They've never driven a tractor. They've never ridden a motorbike. They've never ridden a horse. We just have as our startup that we have to train those people. We have to welcome them into the business. We have to teach them. We have to teach them about all of those practical hands-on skills, but life skills as well in rural and regional Australia. It's hot, it's dangerous, it's big machinery, it's long distances, all those things we just factor in that we have to teach people that. And it's a bonus if someone is more skilled in those areas, but we want energy and drive. But we also do, we don't employ as many Indigenous Australians as Melissa does, but we employ a reasonable number. And they do come from a slower start, though, or they haven't had the opportunities or the training, and so our expectation of the tasks they'll able to do or the work they'll be able to do in their first startup period is less. It's not less in terms of their wanting to try, but it's just their skills and experiences, or whether it's education or training, or like Melissa said, they might have a license and things. So it's having a little bit more compassion at the start and compassion during the journey. Make sure that people don't get scared, or if they do get scared, sort of, you know, put your arm around them physically and also emotionally, and just check in with them. But it's making sure that our managers and our management teams are aware of that as well. It's easy for me to talk about. I don't actually do it a lot. It's making sure that the people around us are open-minded and are prepared to change and prepared to work with people from different backgrounds. But also, everyone's on a journey. It's not that people are ready to go today. It's what can they bring in the future. And we've really found that some of the really troubled young children that join us, you know, I shouldn't call them children, but people that are 16, 17, 18, that have had a really tough period of life. They're really compassionate with animals often. They're often really caring about their equipment. They really care about doing that extra bit, and they make great team members long term. So some of our best supervisors didn't grow up on farms. You know, one of them is, you know, she had a good upbringing, but, you know, she left the UK, hadn't really done anything in Northern Australia. She's, you know, valuable part of our management team now, and we just broke those barriers down. Having people from diverse backgrounds is just so so valuable in for us in our business. So I probably haven't answered your question, Laureta, well, but
no, that you've covered a lot of ground there, Troy. Thank you. And I think it's so as leaders like yourself, it's really you know, a massive responsibility, and I can imagine all the managers in your business. It's not just about whether the person can do the actual job and helping them do that job, but it's helping them to be the best person they can be, especially when they come at that really young age of 16, 17, 18. And, you know, you and your managers might be just the first real role model.
Yeah, it's really easy to sack someone if they don't turn up for 2 or 3 days. Absolutely easy to sack them. But it's not hard to understand why they didn't turn up for 2 or 3 days. It's not hard to just take that minute and say, you okay, or why didn't you show up, or what happened? And often it's something happened to a family member, or something happened to a friend, and you work through why it's important, why they needed to have made that phone call, why you care, how can I help you? You can get some really sticky people then that will stick to you pretty hard and do that extra mile for you after a rocky start.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Thanks, Troy. So we've only got about 7 more minutes. So please, everyone, we've got probably time for 1 or 2 more questions, but there is one here, and I'm going to go to you, Danielle. It's in the same vein as some discussions we've had, but how do we address cultural stigma in remote, and I'm going to say regional ag communities? So in regional Australia in general, I think it's getting better, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
There's a Latin saying, and I won't say it in Latin because I'll absolutely ruin it, but it's not with us, without us, not for us, without us. So essentially, it's all about empowerment, it's representation, it's going out there and finding out what is needed, what is wanted, but from the people themselves. And I think getting cultural diversification in all aspects, whether it's in rural, remote areas, all the way through to something like the VFF at a corporate level, it's just, for me, it's all about seeing representation. It's empowering those people to have a voice and actually using that voice in the best way possible and listening to that voice. So not just hearing it, but actually listening it and taking it on board and making that empowerment step.
Thanks, Danielle. Jason, do you have anything to add to that? I suppose we could widen it out, and you've probably addressed it, but just I think our regional communities can be both fantastic places for community, but it can be really sort of harsh and tough. They're in many ways a contradiction. What can we do? I think you've already talked about it, but anything else you'd like to add that we can do for people in country towns and regional areas?
I suppose if there's a setback, and I take an example of when I first moved to Southwest Victoria, I received some homophobia. I had my dairy spray painted with some terrible words. And in response to that, the community really rallied, and they came around and dropped off food and said that, you know, that they're not like that and those sorts of things. What I'm trying to say is, you know, if there's a setback to whichever sort of group that you're trying to bring into your fold, okay, there's a setback, don't write it off, rally around and fix the situation. So that's sort of the best thing I can think of in that respect. You will always have setbacks, but you just need to be able to move forward and address it in a culturally you know, sensitive way, and then just move forward again.
Yep. I think you're right. It's never going to be plain sailing, but as long as many people as possible call it out and say it's not tolerated, go into that tolerance, Melissa, is, you know, we absolutely all have a responsibility to do that. Well, I'm going to wrap up the questions now, but I'm going to ask our panelists if they've got any closing comments. It's okay, absolutely okay if you don't, you've already given enough, but if you've got any closing comments on this topic, speak up now.
I'd just like to say, try and utilise as many of the support networks that you can. There's for LGBTI, there's a Facebook group called Out in Agriculture, which is fantastic, and I'd encourage anyone who has LGBTI people on staff to let them know of that if they don't know about it already. In the States, they have a conference called Cultivating Change and stuff, which is an LGBTI in Agriculture conference. I'd love to see something like that in Australia. So yeah, just utilise the support networks, and that goes into different cultures and stuff as well.
Yep. Oh, great. Some great social media accounts there, Jason. Thanks, and initiatives. All right, Melissa.
I'd say take the chance on people. Give people a go, and it's not always going to be great, but I tell you, when it hits the mark, for me, the greatest reward I can ever have is seeing other people's success, seeing people grow. It's so fulfilling to see people become their best selves, but they need opportunities. People need opportunities and second chances. So tolerance.
Yep. Great. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. So I think we're all put a virtual applause together for Jason, Troy, Danielle, and Melissa. Thank you very much for joining us today. Absolutely fantastic chat that could have went on for another couple of hours, I'm sure. Now, I'm going to just give a bit of a plug to the Future Drought Fund initiatives that are being run through the ARLF. So there's the mentoring program, which the NFF has a big role in, and also this leadership development opportunity. So maybe, Hayley, if you can put a link in the chat, that'd be wonderful. To those opportunities. And I just a bit of promotion for tomorrow as well, being National Agriculture Day, which I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody about on the line. So the very apt to what we've been talking about today, but it's about careers in agriculture, from from picking fruit to being the president of the NFF to being the agriculture minister. There's so many, as we all know, opportunities in our industry. And so the theme of tomorrow is Ag Venture, and we're just calling on people if they've got a social media platform to share their story using the hashtag Ag Venture and Ag Day AU. So thank you. Getting lots of thanks for our panelists in the chat there, but that's all from us. As I said, we have been recording this, so if you want to share it with your friends and your colleagues, or indeed listen again, you can. But that's all. We got off to a bit of a rocky start, but I think we found our feet there. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.